Let me welcome everybody. So I'm Solon Simmons, and I want to welcome you to, what is it? This our second day of Peace Week, a really exciting event at the Carter School in which we celebrate peace and the work that's being done in scholarship in the area. This is a specific event that's dedicated to narrative. And we're very excited about narrative at the Carter School in particular right now, because we have a new lab, the newest peace lab at the Carter School, the Narrative Transformation Lab, known as TNT Lab, as for those of us who are part of it. And what we're going to do as for today's events is that so I'm Solon Simmons, professor in Carter School and the director, but rather than having me talk about the lab itself, what I wanted to do is I wanted to spotlight the students who are the major players in the lab and who comprise the lab themselves in their work. So what we'll do is work through various projects that are happening in the lab, talk about internships that are ongoing in the lab that maybe even other students might have an interest in the future, and some general directions. And we'll be happy to entertain questions and get some feedback for what it is that the community, the Carter School community more generally, and the field of peace and conflict resolution would like to see in such an entity like this one. So I do want to direct you as well to the, let me see if I can paste this in the chat. We do have a website, and you can see it there pasted in the chat for the Narrative Transformation Lab. And we're trying to make this website useful to you, meaning people who would like to learn about narrative and who have an interest more broadly in how narrative works and narrative resources, to be able to go there and spend some time, and hopefully it would be fresh and new in many respects. And you'll find resources that you don't find elsewhere, and it will continue to grow over time. There are a number of sort of little features to the website that we're proud of that you'll discover if you go there. But please check that out as we build our community. So let me move forward and introduce our team that you'll be meeting today. And this is the work that they're going, and we'll be meeting and see the work that they're doing as part of the lab. And I hope you'll see how diverse the lab, the work being done at the lab is, and how much opportunity it is for different kinds of work. So first we'll have our PhD students, and the Carter School has always been very proud of our PhD students because they're in a special place to do a different kind of work than other students are able to do, dedicating their lives as they have to their scholarship and their practice. So we'll have three speakers there. The first is Audrey Williams, who's the lab manager at TNT and responsible for most of that website you see there, a PhD student at the Carter School, and she focuses on narrative music and conflict transformation. So we'll first have Audrey speak about a really interesting project. Then we're going to have Oakley Hill, who's also pursuing a PhD in conflict analysis and resolution at the school. His current research interests include social narratology, religious deconversion, and American civil conflict, and very proud of Oakley for his work on a book project that he's developing that came out of his master's thesis, which is very rare indeed. And then we're going to have Alana Sokol, who's a peace engineering fellow and a PhD at the Carter School, currently working on an independent study with the lab, and she focuses on smart city, public-private partnerships, strategic narratives, and business management. So we'll have a brief discussion from each of these, and then after that, we'll get to the three interns. One of our interns that can't be here, Nicole Straczynski, because she's at our Korea campus right now. So this would be, I think, 6 in the morning, maybe, or so. Anyway, it'd be very early for her, and she wasn't able to attend today. But we're very proud of Nicole's work as well. But our three interns who are undergraduates and working in a very dedicated with a lab, Hannah Schmutzer is an undergraduate research intern at TNT Lab and peacebuilding fellow at the Carter School. Her research aims to use creative outlets and narrative work to better understand diverse people in conflict and division. We have Ella Jackson, an undergraduate research intern at TNT Lab and peacebuilding fellow at the Carter School as well. She's working toward her dual degree in chess in the Carter School. Her research interests include human rights, peace building, and narrative. And then Jalen Barrett is an undergraduate research intern at TNT Lab and a peace building fellow at the Carter School as well. Her research interests focus on communication, counterculture, and the arts. And so a few final words before we turn it over to Audrey, who will give us a presentation. We have a long tradition of narrative and study of and scholarship of narrative at the Carter School, but we're trying to think of this as a new moment to grow and expand in a wide variety of directions. So if you have any interest in narrative, if you've been with the Carter School and you'd like to join in some way back, if you'd like to be affiliated with our lab in some way, or if you know undergraduate students who'd like internship opportunities or even work study opportunities, we're happy to entertain that, build on projects with you, and really try to create a vibrant community, because that's what we want to have here, is sort of growing, vibrant, interesting community, and I think we have this rare opportunity to host it. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Audrey Williams.
Thanks, Solon, and excited to see everyone here for Peace Week. So I'm going to do that Zoom ritual where I share my screen. And just kind of start us off here. So again, as Solon mentioned, I am a PhD student. I'm the lab manager at TNT Lab. And I'm going to be talking today a little bit about a specific song, Bella Ciao, to help us understand how narrative approaches can illuminate the relationships between music and conflict. So if you have heard of this song and you feel comfortable doing so, definitely put that in the chat and maybe mention when you first came across it. So what is Bella Ciao? Is it a work song sung by women workers in the rice paddies of Northeast Italy? Is it a World War II era resistance song narrating the fight of Italian partisans against the fascism of the mid-20th century? Is it a contemporary protest song taken up by often left-leaning resistance and protest movements across the world? Or is it a commercialized hit popularized through the Spanish origin Netflix show Money Heist, which incorporated Bella Ciao into its story? The answer is that it is all of these, but that doesn't mean that the stories of these different versions stay the same with each version. So I'm going to take us through these 4 iterations and talk a bit about what we can learn from the stories of the song by identifying the hero, the villain, and the conflict in the lyrics. So first up is this Mondina version. It is this version sung by women rice paddy workers in Northeast Italy. It is a work song. The history of Bella Ciao really spotlights its time as a resistance song during the mid-20th century. And so these origins as a work song, as a women's work song, often get obscured. So that's why it's really important to start here. So let's start with these lyrics. In the morning as I got up, oh Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. In the morning as I got up to the rice paddy fields, I have to go. The boss is standing with his cane. Oh, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. The boss is standing with his cane, and we work with our backs curved. So from these lyrics, and they're just an excerpt of the longer lyrics, we come to understand that our heroes are the women workers, our villain is the boss that harshly oversees their difficult work, and the conflict is that desire to escape these oppressive work conditions. So we see that we are caught in a struggle for workers' rights. So even before Bella Ciao began to take on anti-fascist political connotations in the mid-20th century, this Mondina version revealed deep layers of class conflict and particularly women's experience of it. So this is where it really starts to get its apocryphal origins. The partisan version of Bella Ciao is thought to have originated in World War II, in the Italian Civil War, and it's thought to have been sung by partisans who were fighting against fascism at this time. That there isn't much evidence to show that this is actually true, that it was actually sung this way. But what that shows is that this is a story that has come to define the meaning made around this partisan version. And certainly those themes of political resistance are there in the lyrics. So, one morning I awakened, oh Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. One morning I awakened and I found the invader. Oh partisan, carry me away, oh Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. Oh partisan, carry me away because I feel death approaching. So here our hero is an everyday person who, having found invasion at his door, decides to join the partisan fight against this invader, who is our villain. Note here how vague the actual characters are. Partisan, invader, the only way we can know who these characters actually are is by understanding the historical context around the origins and uses of this song. A partisan is simply someone who is deeply committed to a particular political party, and there's nothing explicit here about anti-fascism. Yet anti-fascist and often leftist struggles take up this song as an anthem across the 20th century. So in the 1960s, Bella Ciao began to spread beyond Italy, and it became an anthem of many diverse leftist, workers, and anti-fascist movements. And actually, the very first time I heard Bella Ciao, it was in Turkish. It was a version by Grup Yorum, a leftist band from Turkey. The word yorum literally translates to commentary, and so for decades they have been making music that takes on political and social issues, and they often pay a price for it. So recently, the band has faced a ban, including some jailing of its members, and two of its members, Ibrahim Gökçek and Helin Bolek, actually died in prison while on hunger strike. So for them, music is literally political and literally a life and death conflict. So here we can see some different lyrics, and we must remember that they're in the context of Turkey in the late 20th and early 21st century. See, it was one morning when I awoke, ciao bella, ciao bella, ciao bella, ciao, 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 that I found every corner of my homeland under occupation, its hands all tied up. Oh, partisan, take me with you, ciao bella, ciao bella, ciao bella, ciao, ciao, ciao. Take me with you to your mountains. I cannot endure this captivity. So these lyrics aren't drastically different from the Italian partisan version, and yet those small differences do matter. We still have our partisan hero off to join the fight, but here it is against occupation. And it's worth noting here that Grup Yorum has been known for highlighting the Kurdish struggle in Turkey, and there are themes of resistance and occupation in that struggle. So it's in the 2020s, where we are now, even though it's kind of hard to believe, that Bella Ciao takes on a new life. The popular Netflix show Money Heist, which ran from 2019 to 2021, incorporated Bella Ciao directly into the show's story, which tells of an enigmatic character, the professor, who gathers together a band of robbers to carry out a heist on the Royal Mint of Spain. So what's noticeable about this song is that it's not mere background music, it's a plot point. So here's Tokyo, the narrator of the series. She says, the life of the professor revolved around one idea, resistance. His grandfather, who had fought against the fascists in Italy, taught him the song, and he taught it to us. There are many different versions of the song that play out during the show. Notably, the Italian lyrics of the partisan version are used in the show. But again, because we know the context from this show, the story elements change from that original version. Our heroes are not partisans, but rather anti-capitalist anti-heroes. Whether or not they seek personal gain from the heist, the very act of the heist stands in for a dramatic struggle against the inequality laid bare by the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. So what we see here after its popularization is that Bella Ciao covers start to appear across a wide variety of genres. But then the question remains, as it gets popularized into these genres, does it start to lose some of its political resistance meaning? In the current day, the song does pop up in protest and resistance movements. It's popped up in the Ukrainian resistance against Russian military occupation. It's popped up in protests against mandatory hijab in Iran following the killing of Kurdish woman Jina Mahsa Amini. And yet there are dance versions, there are lo-fi versions. So it begs the question of how this song moves through the world now, that it is not just a protest song, but it is a popular hit. And those protest origins are not necessarily as well known for those who've just come to the song through Money Heist. So it begs some questions about what these many different versions of Bella Ciao can mean and how we might use those meanings to do protest and resistance in the 21st century. Yeah, I look forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Audrey. That's fantastic and right on time, which is good. We're trying to give 8 minutes for each one of our performers here. So next we're going to turn to Oakley Hill, and he'll present the work that he's doing in association with the lab.
All right. Hello, everybody. All right. So I'm going to, so as I move from my current project, which is on religious deconversion and conflict, and into my dissertation project, I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of make my current orientation and some of my hypotheses explicit. I find that a very useful exercise. I'm going to move kind of fast just for the interest of time, but my hope is that I don't throw anybody off balance by doing that. Okay. So, okay, let me see if I can change this. All right. Okay, so if you don't know what QAnon is, I have to say good for you. It's not particularly an enjoyable literary tradition, but I'm going to share with you here the core QAnon myth. In the QAnon myth, Donald Trump is fighting a holy war against a global cabal of satanic pedophiles who control American media and politics. Those who fight against Trump are a part of a deep state or a secret government that functions as a puppet master controlling American politics. The prophesied climax of the QAnon story is when the storm, or the self-identified patriots who make up the QAnon movement, confront what's called the cabal, or the deep state of pedophiles, and kills them in mass extrajuridical killings. I think one thing that's important to note here is that QAnon, there's already pretty good narrative analysis on this, that QAnon in a lot of ways is a copy and paste of early 20th century anti-Semitic propaganda. But QAnon itself doesn't actually propose any particular ideology. So one way to understand QAnon is fascism without fascists. So it proposes an interpretation of the world. It proposes particular goals, strategies, and tactics that are themselves fundamentally fascistic, but it doesn't actually propose fascism as a political system. So I think that's an important distinction to make here. I think there is a connection. I'm very interested, especially I've been reflecting over the last month, that I'm going to be starting this study in the midst of the 2024 election. So I've started to pay attention to political campaign rallies. And one of the things that really stood out to me was Trump's rally in Waco, Texas 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, I guess now. So Trump did not embrace QAnon in the 2016 election, in small part because QAnon didn't exist then. And he did not embrace QAnon during the 2020 election. But it seems, judging by his Waco, Texas rally and some of the other things he's been posting the last few weeks, it seems that Trump has thoroughly embraced QAnon and made it the mythos of his campaign. So here's a quote from his campaign a few days ago. 2024 is the final battle. So that should bring to mind the storm meets the cabal. Our enemies are desperate to stop us because they know we are the only ones who can stop them. They're not coming for me, they're coming for you. I'm just standing in their way. The stakes of this election could not be more clear. Either we surrender to the demonic forces abolishing and demolishing our country, or we defeat them in a landslide. Either, and then here's another key one, either the deep state destroys America, or we destroy the deep state. That's the way it's got to be. I'll stop there. But I think what we're seeing here is a full embrace of QAnon. And I think there's a particular danger in this, in particular because if we put on our Aristotle hat and think of poetics for a moment and the kind of emotions and motivations that stories that stories instill within us, and specifically particular kinds of stories, I think we should be wary of this type of story. I'm going to skip most of this slide, but this is a slide about what a conspiracy story is. First, it's a political narrative with heroes, villains, justice, and injustice. It's a satirical plot structure, and there's anagogical horror. So if you want to think of anagogy, think of, Solon Simmons actually coined me into this imagery, but think about walking into a cathedral, right? You see, when you walk into a cathedral and it opens up, you experience a sense of awe. and that's you experience beauty and holiness, or beauty and sacredness. There's also there's also another side of that coin, where you don't experience beauty, you experience the ugly, and you don't experience the sacred, you experience the evil. So that's anagogical horror. So conspiracy stories are stories that encapsulate those three things. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, there's two things I want to point out. First, these kinds of stories have particular functions. They function to delegitimize certain authority figures and motivate their readers to identify themselves and find security in smaller subnational groups. And then when they're believed, conspiracy stories also shrink the boundary of moral consideration. A good example of this is, well, I'll skip the example, but for example, if you don't, within conspiracy movements, and I feel like I can speak with some degree of experience here because I was born into a Bircher family, or John Birch Society family. I've deconverted from that, but I remember what it was like. And when you're in a conspiratorial worldview, there's the moral community of people who believe the conspiracy story and know it to be true. And then everyone else outside that is either deceived or a deceiver. So it creates a particular type of community where you must either convert non-believers or destroy them. There's a particular, the way these stories affect us is very violent. So I think we should be aware of this, and I think we should be aware that one possibility with Trump now adopting QAnon is that he might QAnonify the MAGA base, which I think would be particularly dangerous. Okay. So I'm going to move pretty quick through the next few things. This is something I developed during my last project. I'm just going to say it really quick. We usually think of morality, religion, and politics as three separate and distinct domains. One good example of this is the American division between church and state, which is an institutional division. But when we're thinking about the narrative world, it's really important. I think it's very important that we understand that these are actually a singular domain, and that morality, religion, and politics are three subdomains. And one claim that I'll make is that any change in any one of these subdomains will inevitably change the others. If we want some good books that demonstrate this, George Lakoff's Moral Politics, Max Weber, Stanley Hauerwas, each of these authors start in one of these subdomains and talk about how changes in this domain will inevitably make changes in the others. My argument is in bringing these three authors together and saying this is actually one domain. So I think one of the things that Trump and QAnon are particularly good at is rooting themselves in the religious ethos of American patriotism, and using the moral capital they acquire by doing so to transform the other domains. But what will eventually happen is a full transformation of all three subdomains. I'm going to skip that too. Okay, so and this is the last thing I'll say is, okay, so the last thing I'll say is this. In this presentation, I've been telling you a very specific kind of knowledge, and that knowledge is based on this question: what role does QAnon play in my story? What role does or if you believe my story, what role does QAnon play in our story? That's a particular kind of knowledge, and that's a particular kind of academic pursuit. My project is actually based on something very different. Obviously, I have that in mind because I believe this is actually a misunderstanding of the other. What my project is going to be based on is acquiring a different kind of knowledge. And that knowledge is based on the question, what role do they play in their story? So what role does QAnon play in their own story? What role does Trump and the MAGA movement play in their own story? So my project is based, perhaps, I think some might say radically, on understanding the other. And that's what I hope to do in my project. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Oakley. That's fantastic. And just a little bit over time. That's great, though. Very interesting and very suggestive. And obviously, I think there'll be a lot of questions for all of our talks today. But let's keep moving forward so we get everyone out there. And now we have Alana Sokol, who's going to be talking about her project and the work she's doing with the lab on smart cities.
Thank you. As Solon and all the others have shared, narrative can take us in many ways. So I'll be going on the tech route for this one. I would do PowerPoint, but my laptop overheats, so we are in a PDF of my PowerPoint. But without further ado, I will get started. So I just wanted to start by explaining, what my topic is. So I've been really interested in emerging technologies, specifically smart cities, where public-private partners are engaging in developing these spaces, and these different organizational conflicts are occurring. And so a lot of this narrative research has looked at problem-solving techniques and looking at what conflicts and dynamics are happening underneath the surface that we may not be exposed to. And just for a quick definitional piece of this, as I'm defining it, a public-private partner, or commonly referred to as P3, is a collaboration between a state entity and a private sector company. And in this case, they're looking to improve public infrastructure and offer public services. And a smart city here is an efficient government service looking to improve technological infrastructure and be more inclusive and accessible. And I share that here only because I'll further explain that there's other kinds of urban technology spaces. So the way in which this narrative is being used is in the smart city terminology. So from the narrative lens, I've been looking at these strategic narratives. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm focusing on smart cities. But in other parts of the world, they look at this technology in different ways. So in the US, we use the term smart city, again, looks at urban governance and techno solutions. So utilizing the private sector to help develop technologies. In other parts of the world, such as China, they call it a safe city, and they're looking to look at political order, security, and harmony. In the EU, they're calling it a sustainable city, looking at privacy, participation, and ecology. Each of these are different narratives in which they're trying to kind of have a geopolitical soft power. The way in which they explain their urban technologies and their development is also the narrative in which they're trying to push onto other development spaces. So again, for my research, I've been focusing on smart city, and I've been conscious not to use the other terminologies, knowing that they, from a narrative lens, do mean something different. And there's different regions that are trying to use that narrative power in a different way. So for the smart city example, I've been pulling from the root narratives that Solon has developed to think about the different themes and codings of how the different public-private partners are coming together to develop these spaces. So an example that I'll use is the example in Canada. The city of Toronto asked a private sector company in the US to help them develop a city space. And as they were working through this public-private partnership, certain conflicts started to come up around data governance and different ways they were going to have different trust and power dynamics between the two. So the project ended up not being successful due to these different underlying conflicts. And the way that they discussed these conflicts was also conflictual. So in this case, the two groups, the public sector and the private sector, fell into different root narratives, and their narratives didn't align. And a result of that was this project not being successful. So being able to analyze these different tensions would have possibly allowed them to come together and actually see the project come to fruition. So one thing that we've been discussing, Solon and I, is this kind of, in the US, the libertarian model regarding smart cities. So in the US, there's a keen interest on rights and, not being told what to do and kind of having your own space and saying what you want to say, and all of that kind of political and economic power tied to that. But in the smart city space, there's this need to have security, so technologies that are looking to have like data and sensors and kind of keep the space safe. So there's a lot of tension regarding how we discuss even what this space is. So analyzing these different conflicts led me to find literature regarding organizational narrative communications. How do these different organizations talk about who they are and represent what they want to do in the space? So some of the literature goes to in organizations like mission, vision, value, and how they discuss what they want to do when they're developing these technologies and working with others to find alignment. So when these organizations are coming up with these statements and these narratives, these storylines can occur that need to be challenged or negotiated depending on what's happening in real world events. So one of the theories was the communicative constitution of organization perspective, which was really interesting because it allowed for these storylines to have different kinds of recognition, practice, power, and modification. So how do we re-examine narratives when they don't align? And I won't go too into detail here because I notice I'm starting to get at time, but I've noticed a lot of these private sector organizations using this problem-solving approach to continue to work with the public sector if they want to continue developing these different city spaces. And then a quote that I liked from some of the readings that I've been doing was that sometimes these smart cities can have conflicts or crises. So one of the quotes was, a crisis can change identity, disrupt patterns of coordination, shift roles, hierarchies and responsibilities, and change membership patterns. So I think it's important to note here that not all conflicts can be bad. They can help readjust positionings of groups and examine kind of the power dynamics occurring here. And then questions that I won't ask out loud, but I'll just let people self-reflect on when thinking about narratives and different organizations working to develop these spaces for another time.
All right, well, great. Thank you so much. And let's give a little round of applause for everybody. Great job, all the PhD students. So you can see the great variety of projects that are coming out, and two of these are related to dissertation topics, and Audrey's is related to her dissertation topic, but is not specifically on her topic, although it is the subject of what we call a rabbit hole, which is one of the features of the Narrative Transformation Lab. The rabbit hole concept is meant to be an Alice in Wonderland reference where you go down into it and you end up in a different world, not a classic research project, but something that explores a particular theme using web resources primarily for the educational purpose. So anyway, that's a great little taste of what's going on in the PhD level. I want to shift now to the undergraduate level, where we have quite a bit of vibrancy as well. Start with Hannah Schmutzer and what she's going to be doing. We're only going to give you 5 minutes, though. So go ahead and let's, Hannah, kick us off and tell us about your experience.
Hello, my name is Hannah, and I'll keep to the 5 minutes, although everybody who around me knows that that's a little bit difficult, but I got it. Yeah, so to branch off what we're talking about with the rabbit holes, my particular rabbit hole topic relates to fashion as a physical narrative. And I want to explore how like fashion can be seen as a narrative without words. And one aspect of the rabbit holes is kind of a more niche topic of narrative. So I'm focusing specifically on the color purple and how it used to be, he used to have the narrative that it represented wealth and status. And throughout the historical context, like how that narrative has changed along with society. And I'm going to try to finish with well, what is today's modern society's color purple? What is your color purple? So the rabbit hole in the content of it is similar to my interests within the field. I'm really interested in cross-cultural communication and cross-cultural understanding, cultural exchange, and like arts as a peace building tool. And I believe that there are certain aspects of culture that are creative expression, such as fashion and food and music and narratives. And so it's been amazing to be able to kind of focus on one of my passion projects and kind of center that into something more niche and through the rabbit hole project. So I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And the structure of the rabbit hole is also quite interesting and definitely challenged my ways of thinking and my ways about partaking in research. It is a research-esque, like it's not like set in stone hard research, but we're trying to like create the platform to like provide a trail of thought. So because it's pretty creative in that format, it made me kind of reflect and look at fashion and culture in a different way, which has been interesting. But I'm still in the process of that, so I don't really want to speak that much towards that because you'll see my rabbit hole if you guys see the website at the end. And okay, yeah, that was really fast. I feel like that was anyways, yeah, that's the gist. The rabbit holes are a really great experience, and I'm glad to be able to focus on a niche aspect of something that of a wider interest of mine. And it makes me think differently. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, you gave away a lot of your time. So anyway, that was fantastic. So that's fantastic. So yeah, the rabbit holes are really fun, and you can see that what they're going to utilize is they're going to utilize the specific interests and talents really of the particular researchers who are going to be gathering their thoughts there. And they're going to be a bit of a curatorial space too, where they're going to be things that you won't then have to go and chase down. So if you're interested in the color purple, you're going to learn a lot about it from Hannah's explorations. And so you won't have to double down on that yourself. But that's not the only person we've got here. We've also got Ella Jackson, and she's also working as an intern with the lab. So let me turn it over to Ella and give you your 5 minutes.
Hello, good afternoon. I'll also try to keep mine down to 5. Our interns aren't very talented at keeping our brains locked in and our thoughts, but I'm working with our peace building fellows this semester along with Hannah and Jalen. I'm actually a global affairs major initially, and I'm working on getting a dual degree in both that and now conflict analysis. And I'm very happy to be here. So my focus are a little bit more on human rights in a global scale. That's been my peak interest. I hope to be a diplomat one day. And you can actually kind of see that through the rabbit hole that will hopefully go on site in a couple of weeks, months, praying. But my rabbit hole is going to be about the humanizing and dehumanizing language that takes place after someone who was committed for a crime and served their time enters back into society. And I'm looking at multiple different programs of rehabilitation and reentry. And I'm looking at the narratives and what, as a society, through non-government entities, we have for people who are looking to create a new life and start in that way. And this research has been of a great interest to me because I originally was a criminal, more of a lawyer side type major. That's what I wanted to be in high school. I studied criminal justice for 1 semester at the University of Southern California. And then I saw how depressing it'd be to be a defense attorney, which was my ultimate goal. So I kind of switched sides into my other focuses, still keeping the idea of I want to help people whose rights aren't always kept in mind or respected by the community. And working with the Narrative Lab has really shown me how important story is to seeing someone's experiences and really seeing how people interpreted what they've went through and fully understanding just other people's situations. I've never been in prison, hopefully will not go to prison, but that doesn't mean I cannot take the time to use my skills of listening, understanding, and comprehension to fully interpret people's emotions and how they feel when they're re-entering society. So I'm so happy to get this opportunity to study this in intern lab. It doesn't really coexist with what I'm studying in school, but this has helped me with research as a whole. As I told Solon and Audrey when I first started, I want to become a better writer and a better researcher. And if you are a student who wants to work on publications and research and writing, this is the internship for you. Yes, this is an internship for you. I'm currently also working on a research paper about women's rights and femicide in Latin America, and another project paper on women's safety on George Mason's campus. And I've taken everything I've learned from our thematic coding and researching, and just every single tip and advice that our PhD students and Solon have given us. And has helped me tremendously this semester, working on 3 projects at the same time. And I'm hoping to take what I'm learning now to complete, hopefully, an Oscar-supported program for my final capstone as a senior. So I would definitely say, if you're interested, don't be afraid. We're all nice, we don't bite. It's been a really supportive program since I've joined. And listen, if you like thematic coding, boy, do we got some for you. So much, and you learn so much while doing it too. If those on the group, because I have an extra minute on me, don't know what thematic coding is, it's more of analyzing words, language that are being used. We're currently, you can see our project on the TNT website. We're going through the different themes and multiple excerpts and writings and just coding them to different themes, so you can kind of see a connection. So if you want to know more about fantasy, we got it. Fiction, we got a giant fiction tab. I'm currently working on an excerpt that talks about sacrifice and death and just humanity from the Holocaust. And it's really been some powerful work that I would not have read or even experienced otherwise in my programs. And Solon's got a bunch of excerpts and books for everybody. So if you if you want to read, he's the man for you. But that's my 5 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And I love how you transition also in this narrative themography, because some of we have 2 big projects that the interns are working on this semester, and that doesn't mean that to be the only thing interns will ever do, but working on the rabbit holes, which is we're kind of trying to demonstrate what this concept is as a space of curation for narrative resources, and also the narrative themography, which is we're trying to take the important books in the field, pull out the important excerpts, organize those into themes that you can then go and just pull for yourself. You don't have to do all that work on your own. And if you didn't have time to read all those books, maybe this is a more efficient way to do it. Okay, so that we're doing that work for you. But anyway, thanks so much, Ella. And then we're going to go last but not least to Jalen Barrett, who's our 3rd intern for today.
All right. Hi, guys. And I'm just going to, Ella, that was a great explanation. I'm going to go with the intersection of our study and between, your other major and conflict itself, as an intersection for everything we do. We talk a lot about involving everybody and getting diversity. And what happens when we intersect is like these new ideas and new perspectives pop up. And it's great, but that is also why we want to encourage people to stay open. I feel the real problem isn't when we come together, it's when we close off completely. So going back to Oakley's project on just kind of isolation, I feel like in the end I enjoy conflict most because that's what we're fighting, isolation. One of my favorite things about coming to Mason has been the connectedness of topics in one class to another class to another class, and going from a climate change class and then going into a conflict and systems class that gives you a little bit of hope. So that's been very nice. And I really do enjoy the rabbit hole format because it allows you to kind of insert your own personality into that research. I like the word curator because you get to show, hey, this is who I am based on my interests. And my rabbit hole, my interest right now is the 13th Moon publication. It was an editorial magazine, a literary magazine that spanned from the 1970s to the 2000s. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. But my favorite thing about it is it's not famous women or women of notoriety coming and saying, with a cult following almost, saying, hey, this is what I believe, this is what we're believing. It was very submission based, meaning you get everyday poets who are also teachers and custodians and singers and actresses, and we're all very creative in this program, which maybe you wouldn't think when you think conflict, but I feel like my work aims to change that, because the more you realize the connectedness of things, and that conflict is that divergence of perspective, conflict is no longer a scary word, it's an exciting word. And to finish off my little speech, I have just an excerpt from the poem that I'm working with, kind of celebrating the ordinary. I love talking about the little moments in life. I love when we come together, that is the everyday experiences. You don't even know that you're learning when you're talking with somebody, but you are learning through experience. So I'm just gonna read now. The ordinary motion of women. Women pushing strollers down sidewalks or medicine carts, down hospital corridors. Women pacing back and forth to comfort babies, to Xerox memos. Women typing, vacuuming, knitting, plugging switchboards, washing dishes, taking letters, making beds, plucking, posing. Women sitting, women waiting. Old woman on a porch chair every day, keeps older, watching while she sits. The ordinary motion of women is faithful and often difficult, tired and tiring, small, boring, repetitive, helpful, obedient, underpaid. So cheers to the ordinary, and I hope this gave you a little bit of taste of conflict, and I'm going to pass it back off to Solon.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And you can see there, the whole point of these, what we're trying to tap into is the creative imagination of our community, and how they, how a little something like a poem can drag you in. And as we know, what we do now, how we learn in the 21st century, is we learn through the web. And therefore we want to document in the same way, and true to the way that we learn, so that we can respect those patterns and become more efficient thereby. So I'm really excited about that. And you see how Jalen's going to get drawn into this rabbit hole through this one moment. And I hope all you're drawn in a little bit by that too. So what we want to do now is since we have about a half hour, I think, right? We're to go until the quarter till, I think. So we have plenty of time. And what I'd like to do in our conversation, just ask questions, and I'll call on you, and you can talk to whoever you'd like. You can talk to me as well, but we just want to, answer any questions you might have about what the lab is, what it's doing, where we want to go, and also take your advice, because this is what we consider our planning year. So it looks like we've actually done a lot, but all we intended to do this year was sort of plan what we were going to do and get ready. So we're excited, but we're really sort of in our sort of launch mode. So feel free to share with us what you think a lab like this ought to have, what it ought to do, and how we can serve the community better. Because that's, as I like to say, the whole point of this place is to make the lives of the people who participate in it a little bit better. And if we can do that, then we're actually accomplishing something. So open it up for anybody who has any questions or comments. I'm sure all our participants would be happy to field your questions too. Anybody? You got to use your hand function, so I see who it is. Benga, you want to go?
Yes, I would like to go. Thank you very much for the interns. I appreciate you guys sharing your curiosity with us, and the fact that you chose your rabbit hole. And I believe that everybody individually, we have our rabbit holes. And some of us are kind of always very worried and scared of, reaching to what I would describe as the, trigger, because something has to like give us that nudge into wanting to discover. So I'm just wondering, looking forward to seeing the results when it comes out, and I'm hoping that we can then try to kind of do some little analysis of the rabbit hole to kind of tease out the reason why, beyond what you have expressed, the reason why that spurred you to that particular rabbit hole. For instance, why are you interested, beyond what you've explained to me now, why are you interested in the social justice system, or why are you interested in, the particular things that you stated that you really, are curious about. So for me, I want to tease out the, the reason for it, what's for it in that sense, and to kind of understand the narrative DNA of individuals that are, that are partakers of the project. So let me say, for instance, um, from what narrative orientation or point of view are you operating from that informed this, and why are you seeing that concept as the way you're saying it? So primarily, I think what I'm looking forward to is to see another research come out of this in a way that tells us, the narrative DNAs of the interns, in a way that kind of explains the reason why we're interested in the things that we're interested in, beyond experience, beyond stories, and how we are trying to rewrite our own story, or how we're trying to present our understanding of the stories around us. That's what I feel I wanted to share.
And before I go on, and if anyone wants to respond, but I want to say we could easily highlight Benga. Benga is also associated with the lab and been with it from before it was a lab, and it has a very interesting dissertation on narrative theory as well. So you'll want to come to Benga's defense, which I think is next month. Aren't we on for next month, Benga? So that's another thing we could very easily highlight, is that what happens at the end of the process, not just at the beginning of the process, as we go forward. Did anyone want to respond to Benga?
I can.
Okay.
Just from one of the things that really kind of drew us towards our project was we kind of just, Solon and Audrey really said, pick something that you're interested in that you think relates to narrative in one way. And we did go into meetings one-on-one as a group, and we just discussed our ideas, kind of laid everything out we had on the table from a variety of interests. I remember my list, I actually still have it here because I'm hoping to work with it at some point in the future. I had rehabilitation from my experience with Homeboy Cafe, which is a rehabilitation center that went from me visiting once to going national. When I visited, it only had 2 centers, and it's become national, and that really piqued my interest to look further into that. But I also had things such as child soldier testimonies from the Congo, because we're studying that in our other classes, truth and reconciliation commissions, women first responders from the front lines of the pandemic, and popular folk tales such as Aesop fables. So it's kind of really a variety of what I had a personal connection and interest with, and then just seeing which one was easier to research in a short connection of time. But I do see, if this project really does grow with future interns, a deep connection of multiple topics that can be explored and ventured out, and really seeing how interests were piqued from the beginning to the end of this rabbit hole, because I know that's one of our main focus. Why are you intrigued? Why is this research important to you? And how can people connect with not just the research, but you on a personal level with that?
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else have a reaction? Hannah, Jalen?
Something came to me when I was listening to the PhD topics. It was the triangle graph with politics, morality, and religion. And it occurred to me that politics, money, and religion, those were like the 3 topics to stay away from the dinner table, and also the topics that I most wanted to talk about. So yeah, kind of like what Ella said, I'm finally glad to get to that like side work of passion projects that we all kind of have accumulating, like, oh, I want to read this book that pertains to my topic, but with these timelines, it's tight. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity.
That's great. Nothing, Hannah? You want to say anything?
No, yeah, I was gonna head on. I just wasn't sure if we have to move on, but yeah, I agree. Like, kind of like in my mind, like a side quest of my passion project, because I really want to work with like culturally creative activities and means, and I'm really passionate about fashion, like personally. So I was really glad that I was able to explore the intersection between fashion and culture and narrative. It literally felt like the three of my interests like wrapped up. And to be honest, like before the TNT Lab, I wasn't really sure how to like go about it in that way to try to figure out how to like create this like Frankenstein research of like all of my interests. And it was just kind of like laid out on like a silver platter for me, like, hey, if you want to do a rabbit hole, just like pick your topic that's personal to you. And as I mentioned, my rabbit hole project or topic is on the color purple as a narrative of wealth and status. And like originally I was talking about using fashion as a physical narrative, and Solon and Audrey were like, well, what is something that like within fashion, like what drew you to that? And I was like, well, I like the color purple. And I knew that it was like as seen as like only like aristocracy had it in the past. So I was just interested in that. And they were like, okay, research that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have the ability to research this now in a way. And so yeah, just kind of branching off of like your interests and your passions and like finding the intersections for it. And even though it seems like difficult in the way of like trying to connect all these like interests together, there is a possibility. And I have another friend working in the same concept of fashion, but not necessarily as a narrative. She's looking at it through like the environmental lens. So there's just like a lot of different ways that you can go about this. And yeah, my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, that's how we're doing the rabbit holes. No system, no thesis, but it's got a strong theme and ought to teach us something. You know, one of the things I like to say about it is it's rigor without the mortis. That's one of my lines I like to use. That is, you know what I mean? It's like, it's tough. It's good, but it's an academic site, right? We're doing real stuff, but it's not meant to be dead. It's meant to be living and in the lives of the students themselves. Okay, let's turn to another comment or question from Renata.
Hey, I was curious to see how a GMU alumni could get involved. I just finished my master's and I wanted to, come back to the conflict family. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I don't know, Audrey, you might want to field this too. So one of the things that we've done is we've been thoughtful about and haven't yet really delivered on is this idea of different forms of affiliation. So when you create a little institution like a lab, the question is, well, how do I join? What do I do? How am I involved? We have a thing called a Thursday session, which is very open-ended. We do it a Thursday, 2 p.m., which people can come to, mainly student focused. We're going to do a little bit of the business work of the lab there too, maybe once a month. But there are other questions too. You know, how do we get students? How do we get alumni? How do we get faculty? We have other people on the call now who we've been involved with in different ways. So, you know, I'm sort of open and would like to learn. And so the question is, what is it? I suppose would be, how can we be helpful to you? You know, that's one of the main questions that I have, because I want the Carter School to be a resource for our alumni. And I think the labs might be able to do that. So it could be that you would be working on narrative projects down the line. It could be that you'd want to tap in and see what's current. It could be you want to bring us into an organization. This is something we've already been doing with our colleagues, is we can come and share what we're doing if you wanted a narrative perspective or what have you. So I don't know if anyone else, Audrey or anyone else, has any ideas, but this is one of the things where I think we need feedback. You know, how can we be helpful?
Yeah, I'll just throw in there. I mean, I think that's a really good kind of encapsulation of it. Those Thursday meetings really would be the right place. I'll put our contact page in the chat, and that's kind of the best way to get in touch with us about those types of opportunities. But I think the other thing I would say there is that this is our next phase, right? It's reaching out to the broader community. It's being a space where it isn't just, I mean, I think for alumni, right? I think it's really easy to kind of slot back in there because you've been part of the community. It's good to see you, and so that's, once part of Carter School, always part of Carter School as much as you'd like to be. But we're even hoping to expand beyond that, right? It's like, this is not supposed to be just an academic space. That's kind of the ethos behind our website, is that it's not just supposed to communicate, we're the narrative lab and this is what we do, but it's doing the work right there. And it's an easy way to kind of slot in. And then also to hope that people have their own ideas about narrative, and hopefully we can build a space too where we're having a good place to also challenge each other's ideas about narrative. So that's all kind of in the works, but I guess the best way for anyone who's interested in learning more is I'll put that contact in the chat and to reach out so we can start having some discussions around that.
Thank
That's
you.
great. That's great. And I think also if we think about the practice areas and that many of our grads will be active in the real world, and maybe narrative will be relevant there. If there's some way we could highlight that work or engage with that in a meaningful way, I think that's something we'd like to do too down the line. So other questions or comments for us? Lauren. I think you're muted.
Oakley. Oh,
No, you're good. You're good.
could just be the AirPods being unreliable. Love hearing what everyone's curious about and diving into, and it's all really exciting. Oakley, I have a question just about your research and just one of my personal curiosities about QAnon and narrative, which is when you're looking at QAnon, like the death-defying part of the culture that's like sort of inherent to their mythology, like in particular the JFK Jr. like revival story. And like, I guess my question is, what aspect of the narrative even doing there? Like, what's the function? How is it serving the narrative? Like, is that some sort of litmus test for your commitment to the narrative? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I think on a lot of questions about that, especially kind of some of those the QAnon storytelling is kind of interesting in large part because it's a participatory the creation of the QAnon myths is actually participatory. So there's Q, who is probably a handful of people, but behind the alias Q, there's this person who does these Q drops, and they drop these kind of wild and quacky conspiracy theories. But then there's also the Anons, or the followers of Q, who participate in the construction of the story through memes and all sorts of other things. So there's this really interesting interplay between the audience. The audience is not really an audience. The audience is actually participating in the construction of the story. And sometimes you get some really weird stuff out of that, like the JFK, like Elvis is still alive. Like you get these really weird things that come out of this. But I think I think at least the approach I'm going, and some other good research that's been done on this, I can send you the sources if you'd like, is that QAnon and QAnon believers don't necessarily believe that everything Q says is true. But it's almost like reality fan fiction, where it's about truthfulness. It's not about so in a sense, the audience kind of understands that what's being said is not true, but the essence of it is true. I think narrative has a really important role. So there are some researchers who've made that argument. I think narrative has an important role to play here, because I think what we can identify, especially if we apply poetics and root narrative theory, I think what we can, my hypothesis right now is that we can actually analyze QAnon stories and say, what actually holds all of these crazy, quacky conspiracy theories together is that they actually follow a very similar poetic structure and a very similar narrative structure. And so the specific claims that QAnon makes aren't necessarily important, but what is important, what brings the group together, is a common worldview. And I think that common worldview is more or less at this point been synthesized in some of QAnon's core myths, like the one I shared. So that's in a way that's kind of that might be a weird answer, but at least right now that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, thanks. That's
from the
great.
participatory aspect.
What was that?
Really interesting, especially like from this participatory perspective.
Oh, thank you.
So anybody else, other questions that people have for any of our interns or our PhD students, or if you want to know how to be involved, or what advice for us? And if not, I think we have another question from one of our participants. Audrey,
Yeah, I can jump in here. Yeah, for the PhD students specifically, we kind of got little snapshots of what we've been working on, and I wonder if there's, and this can, can be a very high stakes question, but thinking about, what is it that, like, what is the kind of kernel of new knowledge that you're trying to produce here? It, could be adding to the literature, adding to, right, the field. Is there something that you're starting to get a sense of, yeah, that is the thing that I feel I'm really developing here that doesn't exist yet?
Well, if I may, I think I can use my dissertation as an example. And this morning or earlier today, I think I came to the realization that one of the contributions that my research has made to the research in narrative study is in being able to understand the concept of, let's say, country or nation, or so when you're looking at a country, you understand that that's like a geographic space, right? And within this country, you have people, diverse nations, ethnic, tribal, whatever it is, within that same space. And I think narrative has aided my better understanding of um, not putting, not mixing things up, in the sense that when I'm looking at development narratives in Nigeria, right? I'm speaking Nigeria writ large. I'm speaking Nigeria, and I'm talking about the South, the North, the East, and West, and literally everything. But this research has made me understand the concept of country as geography, and nation as ideology in that sense. And then when I'm looking at how they have used narrative to engage concepts like development, concepts like conflict or peace, then I need to narrow down to the details of what makes this the nation of Yorubas, or what makes this space the nation of the Igbos, or what makes the North the nation of the Hausa Fulani tribal group. So when I'm looking at narratives of development in Nigeria, I'm not looking at narrative of development in Nigeria as a single country. I should be looking at narrative of development in Nigeria as that nations within that country. And I think that clearly my research will be like a recommendation of some sort to intervene, as that probably we need to change the ways we think about engaging. If you want to put money in northern Nigeria, for instance, you need to not just understand the northern Nigeria as a nation on its own, as people within that space, within that geographic space, holding on to specific narratives. And that's what you need to actually key into, not the concept of, oh yeah, northern Nigeria is underdeveloped, so therefore let's help them develop education as if that's going to help them. But I think narrative has teased it has helped me tease the root narrative theory, for instance, has helped me tease out the particularities of these spaces, and then coming up with the kind of recommendations that will aid better understanding of intervention in that space, so that you are not just delivering interventions that are specific to those needs, you're delivering interventions specific to those needs because you are aware, because you have the right knowledge of who the people are, and not just Nigeria as a country, but nations within that country. And that's the narrative that you're tending to. I think that's one thing that this lab has helped me to achieve. And I think that's the functionality of the root narrative theory in that space, if it makes any sense.
Thanks, Benga. That's great. Other PhD students want to react?
Yeah, I can react. So Audrey, if I understand your question, is the question how has the lab and the tools we have influenced my research and approach? Is that kind of like a good synthesis, or no?
I mean, you can talk about that too, but just what is it? I mean, as doctoral researchers, right? By the end of it, our dissertation is supposed to do something significant, right? New. And we're kind of we're not fully at the beginning of it, right? We're about halfway through. But like what is the thing that you're starting to kind of really hone in on and think, yeah, this is what I'm going to be adding to the field once this research is done?
I think maybe what I'll say is I feel like I'm really stepping into like an ontology and an ethics of interdependence. And what I mean by that is I think I'm at the point where, and I feel like I've learned this from Solon and from Dr. Solon Simmons and Dr. Sarah Cobb, in the sense that I really don't think I can understand. Not only do I not think I can understand the other within my own story, I actually don't think I can understand myself within my own story. I think in order, so the interdependence ontology that I'm referring to is, if we're going to understand us and them in any particular conflict, we actually have to understand both on their own terms. And if we don't do that, we actually misunderstand them. So it's like, if I understand, like, and I'm trying to apply that to my own project. If I understand QAnon and the MAGA movement in my own story, well, I'm just going to understand them as stupid and evil because they terrify me. But if I try to step into their worldview and use these narrative tools to really get a thorough and deep understanding of who they believe they are, what they believe the world is like, and what function they perform in their own stories, then I can understand them. And then more importantly, I can understand myself, because we exist in the same country, in the same world, and I'm going to have to live with them whether they terrify me or not. So that's, I think that's kind of, so that's kind of an ethical and ontological and that's also an epistemological claim, right? So there's a lot there, but I think that's kind of what I'm contributing in this project. And I think the fact that I'm choosing this group, I think this is a really radical place to apply that kind of ontology. But I'm just going to do it unapologetically. Anyway, I think that's what's going to be what I end up contributing.
Cool. How about you, Alana? What are you going to contribute?
That's a great question. I'm taking more of the practitioner route. So I didn't describe this very well in my presentation, but this space is, $1 billion industry. And there's these patterns of success and failure as cities are, doing great or failing horribly. And a part of that is identifying, where these conflicts are occurring and is there space for intervention. And some of it has been through narrative analysis, even identifying that there's a difference in a smart city, a safe city, and a sustainable city talks about geopolitical powers, data governance, and the trust we have and participation we have with others. So specifically, the smart city context looks at public-private partnerships, and I think there's a lot of space there to look at different forms of cooperation and look at different organizational strategic narratives. So still a lot of space to be developed. It's a newer concept. The development itself is not new. To develop an urban space and try to make it more technologically advanced, but the narrative of a smart city is newer, and it pushes a certain kind of power dynamic upon spaces and people. And then just to answer the question in the chat from Renata, yes, there's definitely a narrative war occurring. People that describe a safe city wouldn't have the same experiences as those trying to work in a smart city. They have different kinds of regimes, different types of economies, and different kinds of goals that each are trying to achieve. So in the US, they wouldn't look to develop a safe city because it counters their own interests and goals of what the space should embrace. So it's interesting to kind of start searching for those different terminologies and see how they're utilizing narrative in that way. And I think Europe and parts of that region still haven't really decided on the term they want to call it yet. So it's interesting to see the push and pull between the US and China and where they narratively go with that. Kind of shows alliances and different, divisions happening globally.
Fantastic. And Audrey, we probably have at least another minute. Did you want to do your piece?
Sure, why not? Yeah. And I just, I asked this because I think it's really fun to kind of listen to it. And I know that behind those small, right, those really concentrated slideshows, there's just a whole web of work going on there. And for me, it's mostly, I was only really able to talk about the lyrics today, but I'm looking at music more broadly as a function of craft. So trying to understand how music moves through the world and how we understand music and how we use music, or rather just kind of work through music in order to work through peace and work through conflict. But to understand that as a function of the way that music is made. So the fact that the lyrics do change even slightly is important. The fact that certain groups, right, are adapting a song is important. And then what I didn't really get to talk about today is, also the way in which the musical interpretation plays out, right? What are the instruments? How fast is it? How slow is it? Are there multiple singers? Is there a single singer? That really influences not just the story of the song, but its mood. So for me, I'm really starting to kind of focus in on this idea of story and mood in music, and what's the split, what's the mix of story and mood, and how does the story of a song, how does the mood of a song help us understand what it might be doing in the world and how people might be taking it up to do peace or do conflict. So yeah.
Fantastic. So you see, there's a lot going on in the Narrative Lab. And I just want to give one little round of applause. Thank you, students. You did a great job. Thank you so much, everybody. This is great. It's exciting. I think we're off to a nice start. And thank you to all of you who've come today. I hope you got a little peek into what we're doing in the lab, and maybe you can spread the word and get a little bit more excitement going. We'd like to build on this from where we're starting and do a lot more and make this a centerpiece and maybe one of the best places in the world, really, to study narrative, peace, and conflict resolution. So anyway, thank you all, and I will see you in the next venue. Bye-bye.